It's a miracle you've gotten your medical license.
A former top-ranked elite doctor looked down on me during my medical school reunion. I was consistently in the bottom of my class while I was in school. When I tried to tell him where I was currently working, he interrupted me.
I'm wasting even 1 second of my time talking to you. A man with such low standards.
He made fun of me in front of all my classmates. Later, in the university hospital where I work, I ran into him again. Immediately after he made his best smug face and said he was invited by the professor, a beautiful nurse appeared with a pale expression. MD, we've got an emergency patient with a serious condition. She was asking for my help.
What?
Hudson was taken aback, but I turned away and rushed to the patient to save his life. I am a 34-year-old doctor named John Robinson. I am currently employed at a university hospital under the supervision of a professor whom I admire.
It had been 10 years since we graduated from medical school.
It was the day of the medical school reunion. Many of our classmates were students who did not immediately enter medical school after graduating from high school. Some of them even changed careers but returned to take their entrance exam. After graduating from high school, I was able to pass the admission exam. I didn't exaggerate when I said I spent all of my time preparing for the entrance exam, except for sleeping. Until I reached high school, I thought we all lived in a different universe based on our grades. If someone was even 1 year older than me, I treated them as a senior and acted as a junior. My classmates, on the other hand, who started the same way I did when we first arrived at school, were nothing more than my classmates. There was no age difference, and we all addressed each other as equals, as classmates. Medical school was indeed a succession of challenges. We had to finish course registration in the midst of the bustle just after admittance. I had to take an excessive number of classes, including general education, before I could adjust to life as a university student. Lectures on basic medicine and other subjects began in the later half of the first year. When specialized lessons began in earnest in the second year, I found it even more difficult to understand them. Once clinical training began, the road to becoming a doctor became clear. The busyness of the program kept me busy, and I was troubled and exhausted by various things every day. We filled in for each other by collaborating on group projects, writing and submitting reports, and so on with our classmates. That's why there was a sense of brotherhood that transcended age and gender. I was confident that everyone at the reunion made time in their busy schedule to come see such friends. The conversation was full of memories of useful indiscretions and embarrassing episodes. I felt relieved to be in a place where I could laugh with old and close friends. However, there were some exceptions.
That's irrelevant to me. I've had no problems till today. My life has been a breeze since being accepted to medical school shortly after graduating from high school.
Hudson Lee was the person who was ecstatic about graduating first in his class. With a smug expression on his face, he interrupted our casual discussion.
It's a miracle you've gotten your medical license.
He snickered at me. I was constantly at the bottom of my class in school, so it's no surprise he looked down on me.
Don't just drop the bomb on me out of nowhere.
I didn't want to disrupt the atmosphere, so I pretended to be a clown and fool off.
You should be ashamed to call yourself a doctor. You and I live in different worlds, don't you think so?
Despite my attempts, he kept bragging about how pleased he was of himself.
I'm a top doctor who earned a cardiology specialty right after finishing my residency.
I reasoned that the sooner I started talking here, the sooner Hudson would be satisfied and depart. According to what I've heard, only approximately 5% of persons under the age of 30 can become board-certified specialists. That's incredible. Hudson's nostrils widened. It was a habit he picked up when he was bragging, and it hadn't changed in 10 years. You know what? If I wanted to talk about my current employer and what I did, but
I'm wasting even 1 second of my time talking to you. A man with such low standards.
Hudson interrupted quickly. He was talking down to me in front of all my classmates. He was the one who started talking about himself a lot, even though we didn't ask anything. Hudson seemed to have found his mentor and left without saying a word.
He hasn't changed a bit.
Joseph, who used to be near the bottom of the class like me, chuckled, astounded. Like our family, he was the eldest son of a businessman family with no one in the medical field. We were the closest among our classmates because we got along very well. We stayed in touch from time to time, but we were both so busy with work that we never got to go out for a drink, even though we talked about it many times. And due to our hard-working nature, we were unable to drink alcohol without fear of receiving an emergency call. But it seemed awkward for 2 grown-ups to go out to supper. Because Joseph and I had always been slow to communicate, we felt that our lack of communication was proof that we were doing well. However, it was still nice to see a friend whom I can trust with my heart. Because his family could not afford a preparatory school, Joseph worked hard and studied for the entrance examination on his own while working part-time.
I'm still paying back the scholarship.
He cynically laughed, yet he did not appear pessimistic. I assumed he had a rewarding career as a clinical surgeon. He just did not perform well in the classroom during medical school, but he excelled during the hands-on training. I believe he made the proper decision to pursue surgery because of his skill as well as his cautious and daring temperament.
I consider being a surgeon to be my calling.
I was proud to have him as a friend, as he proudly said so. 2 months after the reunion, I met Hudson again in the lobby of the university hospital where I worked.
What?
Hudson was surprised as if he had seen a ghost.
Why are you here?
I had just arrived at work, so I had not changed into my lab coat and was not wearing any kind of name tag. I had left my pass, which served as evidence of employment, at home, so I entered through the main entry rather than the service entrance. I am employed in this medical office. Hudson looked surprised. That day, he didn't listen to me very well. But because he was there now, I assumed he was aware of the news.
They begged me to stay because I was at the top of my class. But you did your internship outside after graduation, right?
He was correct. I'd worked at this university hospital since my residency. Of course, practical training for medical school lectures is provided at the university hospital where students are enrolled. After acquiring their medical license, the majority of trainees in the residency program receive their training at the linked hospital. However, there is also the possibility of working as a resident at a public or private hospital. In certain instances, The son of the hospital's director works as a resident at the hospital where the family company is based. It may be more unusual for a doctor to work in the medical department of a university hospital that is not affiliated with the same university from where he or she is graduated.
I was invited here today. Unlike you, a dropout doctor who does odd jobs, I was appointed by Professor Harris.
Hudson, on the other hand, had always been a member of the medical department of the hospital linked with his native university.
I've been chosen as a potential co-author for a paper he's going to present at a conference.
He explained the purpose of his visit to the hospital. Immediately after Hudson showed off his best smug face, a beautiful nurse appeared with a pale expression. "MD, we've got an emergency patient with a serious condition." They were asking for my help. "MD, it's time for surgery." The nurse appeared to receive another call. "I'm on my way," I replied.
What?
Hudson looked astonished.
What do you mean you are a MD?
His voice cracked. "Sorry, I'll explain later." Hudson was taken aback, but I turned away and rushed to the patient to save his life. The surgery on the patient with a thoracic aortic aneurysm was successful due to the medical staff's collaboration. Fortunately, the patient was brought in complaining of chest pain, and the surgery was conducted before the aortic aneurysm ruptured, saving the patient's life. Yes, I am a cardiologist, a specialist in cardiovascular surgery, which is becoming more often referred to as cardiovascular surgery. In our cardiology department, cardiology and cardiothoracic surgery work together to treat patients. "Dr. John, Dr. Hudson is waiting for you in Professor Harris's office." I remembered that I'd been keeping Hudson waiting. I wondered if Professor Harris explained it to him. But knowing Professor Harris, I knew he was probably chatting about his interest and hadn't yet told Hudson the most important things. I knocked on the door of Professor Harris's office. "Excuse me." As expected, Professor Harris and Hudson were smiling and chatting about golf. "I'm sorry for keeping you all waiting." When I interrupted them, Professor Harris gave me a look. I instantly understood his intention.
Oh, well then, excuse me. Please ask John for more details.
Professor Harris exited the room, despite the fact that it was his own.
What do you mean you are MD?
Hudson's nice attitude towards the professor vanished as he exited the room and approached me.
Does that mean you have a doctorate?
He asked me questions one after another. Yeah. I flinched under the pressure of the momentum.
Did you know that only 9% of the doctors under the age of 35 hold a doctorate?
He seemed to like numbers. It is not required if you merely wish to work as a clinician in the field. There are many young doctors who did not require a degree. In my case, I didn't study for a doctorate in graduate school. Because my doctoral dissertation on my research was accepted, I was able to obtain a PhD. It was also thanks to Professor Harris, who supervised me. Just because I earned a doctorate didn't make me a brilliant doctor. It was for research purposes. I was careful not to provoke Hudson's pride too much. I still had something to explain to him. I was a member of the Department of Cardiovascular Surgery, but I wanted to conduct research on an illness that transcended specialities, such as colliding disease. For me, getting a PhD was just a gateway to a dream. My ultimate goal is to gain information and experience so that I can become a general practitioner. I expected Hudson to make fun of me, but he kept his mouth shut and listened. I had a strong desire to work in pediatrics, but in many situations, therapy for specific disorders in children is based on adult treatment methods. I wanted to concentrate my study on certain disorders for which no therapies are currently available. Moving up the ranks at the university hospital was the quickest way to advance the research I wanted to perform. In fact, I had been promised the next post of associate professor.
But you were always at the bottom of the class in medical school. How is this possible?
Yes, I was a failure as a medical student, but I changed my mind and worked hard. When Hudson inquired about it, I decided to begin by explaining why I wanted to be a doctor. When I was a medical student, the reason I couldn't get into my studies was because my beloved sister passed away. My sister Zoe had a chronic pediatric disease, which was generally considered an intractable disease. It was antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, a collagen disease. APS is defined as an autoimmune disease. The formation of autoantibodies called antiphospholipid antibodies causes the blood to clot. It is a disease that causes recurrent arterial and venous blood clots. Zoe's illness inspired me to become a doctor. I wanted to do something to help by studying medicine. However, soon after ending medical school, Zoe passed away in a traffic accident. She was hit by a drunk driver. She was only 10 years old. The death of a close family member sapped all of my energy, including my appetite and desire to study. Whenever I closed my eyes, Zoe's face came to mind, and I could not sleep well. Even when I had reached the limit of my physical power and was about to fall asleep, I would awaken with nightmares of Zoe pleading with me to help her. If I couldn't save Zoe, what would I do if I became a doctor? Such thoughts occurred to me. Furthermore, the fact that my sister's life was taken by someone else's carelessness, a cause of death that had nothing to do with her sickness, threw a large shade over my mind. She had fought the sickness so fiercely for so long, yet life can be so short. I had spent all of my youth studying for the entrance exam and passed it. Maybe I had lost sight of why I wanted to be a doctor and was on the verge of burnout. I had lost all motivation and I was at the bottom of the class all the time. I barely made it because I didn't want to cause any more anguish for my parents, who were also in the grip of grief. I was not at the top of my class, but I was doing reasonably well when I entered the school. However, by the second semester of my freshman year, I had fallen to the bottom of the class and made no attempt to climb back up. My father, even though he was an office worker, held a position in a well-known company, so thankfully we didn't have much financial hardship. I think I was a little naive, to be honest. I am still grateful to my classmates for helping me graduate in 6 years without flunking out. I learned about Zoe's accident during a lecture, and even after almost 6 years, I couldn't help but think about it when I was at university. After graduation, I decided to work as a resident at another hospital to alleviate the shock and sadness of that period. I chose to do a residency program in a university hospital with a professor who was well known in the field of APS research. During my residency, I received a time capsule in the mail. It was from Zoe in heaven. No, to be more precise, Zoe sent me a letter using the future mailbox before she went to heaven. Of course, I received it at my parents' house, so my mother forwarded it to me. According to the attached letter from my mother, it was an assignment for her 10th birthday in elementary school. Many of Zoe's classmates wrote letters to their 20-year-old future selves, but Zoe wrote to me. As soon as I saw Zoe's cute handwriting, which still had the innocence of a 10-year-old, I burst into tears. "John, are you now a great doctor? Please save sick people like me." Tears flowed uncontrollably, and I couldn't stop them. I changed my mind and worked hard from there. This time, it was me, not Hudson, who was nominated as a potential co-author of the study by Professor Harris. I had to apologize to him for one thing. Hudson was unlikely to be mentioned as a co-author on the paper. The first author of the paper was, of course, Professor Harris. And I, who had been conducting the research as Professor Harris's partner, would be credited as a co-author. This was merely a rough idea, as I would be deepening my studies from now on. Hudson looked disappointed. From there, we needed the ideas and perspectives of various clinicians to flesh out the document and increase its accuracy. That is why I recommended Hudson to the professor. Professor Harris was unconcerned with factionalism or power battles. Thus, he interacted openly with other connected university hospitals. Of course, he took the utmost precautions to prevent the leakage of their important data. Professor Harris contacted Hudson's supervisor and requested that Hudson come on that day. I assumed the conversation was poorly communicated. I was sorry for giving Hudson unnecessary expectations. I hope that if our papers turn out well, I could contribute to Hudson's reputation for cooperation. I knew Hudson's specialty was cardiology and that he had excelled in it since medical school.
I made fun of you at the reunion, and you recommended me?
I was kind of embarrassed, so I nodded silently.
I'm sorry for looking down on you until now.
Hudson bowed his head. Well, I appreciate your cooperation. I tapped him lightly on the shoulder in a playful manner. Our eyes met and we both burst out laughing. It was the first time Hudson thought of me as being on his level. It is preferable to save as many patients as possible by working together than having doctors argue. I thought about inviting Hudson the next time I went out for a drink with Joseph. And I like to do my best under Professor Harris's supervision to write the greatest paper possible. I'm not a brilliant doctor yet, but I promise to do my best. So please watch over me. I whispered to my sister, Zoe, who was now in heaven.